Good morning to everyone. My name is Gerasimos Rosados. I am the acting director for the Oil Conservation Division. I'm also the acting chair for the Oil Conservation Commission. Can you all hear me in Pecos Hall?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheila. Appreciate it. Today is Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. We are continuing with our case and our hearing as we have this week for the week of April 7th through the 11th. We're still on the consolidated cases by Goodnight, Midstream, and Empire, New Mexico as follows. Case number 24123, 23614 through 17, case number 23775, and case numbers 24018 through 24020 and 24025. This is the continuation of the evidentiary hearing. Mr. Hearing Officer, I transfer this back over to you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Rosatos. Are there any preliminary matters from the parties before we jump back into testimony?
Mr. Hearing Officer, I don't believe so. The one thing I will note is that Ms. Apodaca requested the parties to provide hard copies for the commission on Friday of any exhibits or additional testimonies that were filed after February 28th. So we did have those prepared and delivered them to Ms. Apodaca this morning. So that's the only thing I can think of in terms of preliminary matters.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rankin. Empire, anything on your side?
I would simply say that we provided copies of our documents yesterday.
All right, great. Okay, so we broke yesterday, if memory serves me right, after the direct examination of Mr. McShane. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Mr. McShane is up for cross-examination at this point. Mr. McShane, I'll just remind you, probably not necessary, but I do it as a matter of course. You're under oath from yesterday. Ms. Tejas, I see your smiling face, so, all right. We're on the record then, I guess.
Sorry. Good morning, Mr. McShane. How are you today?
Good morning.
All right, let's see. So I'll pick up with your CV. This is your revised testimony that was filed in December. Let's see. So your background is you've got a undergraduate degree from Stephen F. Austin State University in geology, correct?
That's correct.
And then you did some, as far as education, you did some additional postgraduate master's work at the same university, but didn't complete a master's program. Is that right?
That's correct.
And also in geology?
Yes.
Okay. And then tell me, just give me a summary of what you did after your formal education.
I went to work out of graduate school for Chesapeake Energy in Oklahoma City. And I worked for Chesapeake Energy for a few years as an operations geologist. And then after Chesapeake Energy, I went to work for Petrohawk and worked for Petrohawk for a couple of years until they were acquired by BHP.
Mr. Hearing Officer, I don't mean to interject. It looks like the court reporters raised their hand online.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Harwood, we can't hear you. Ms. Tejas, what's the issue?
Yes, Ms. Apodaca.
She can't hear.
Find
Okay.
out what Ms. Tejas means.
She says there is no issue. I'm going to lower your hand, Ms. Tejas.
Okay.
We can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
You can hear
No. Even though you're unblocked, we can't hear you. I mean, you're unmuted. We can't hear you, Ms. Tejas. So there must be something with the microphone. Do you mind dropping it in the chat real
Okay.
quickly? Oh,
Can you
there
hear-
you are. Now we can. Yes.
Okay. Whatever just went on, I have not heard one word.
Okay. So, Mr. Rankin, I think and Mr. Hearing Officer, I think we probably just should start over just to make sure we capture everything.
Mr. Rankin, will you rewind?
Sure, it's a good thing we didn't do much. Mr. McShane, I don't think we got just a high summary of what your background is. You started your undergraduate at Stephen F. Austin University in geology, correct?
Yes,
And then you did some postgraduate work towards a master's degree, but didn't complete your master's in geology, correct?
that's correct.
Just give us a recap of just start with your first job out of undergrad.
School at Chesapeake, or out of graduate school, I went to work for Chesapeake Energy.
Okay.
As an operations geologist starting out, worked multiple basins, and then while I was there, started to do appraisal work with different groups on potential asset acquisitions. Then after a few years, went to work for Petrohawk Energy, again, as a development geologist, helping put together development plans for Petrohawk's South Texas assets, including the Eagle Ford, and worked for Petrohawk until BHP acquired Petrohawk, at which time I ended up moving with the ownership team from Petrohawk, and after about a year, we established Halcon Resources, and I worked for Halcon then for another few years, again, working multiple basins, the Williston, the Tuscaloosa Marine Shale, looking at tight gas sands and in East Texas and the Permian as well. And then after that, I got attached to a team that started a private equity backed company, Ajax Resources. We operated in the Permian Basin in Martin and Andrews County. And after 3 years, we sold the company to Diamondback, at which point I worked as a consultant for a couple of years until coming to work for Empire.
Going back to your time at Chesapeake, that was your first oil and gas industry job, is that correct?
While I was in grad school, I worked for a small company, Intervest, out of Plano, and it was working the Appleby field in East Texas, which was Travis Peak, Pettit, tight gas sands.
Okay.
But it was just a part-time job while they were funding my thesis work.
While you were at Chesapeake, did you have any experience with enhanced oil recovery?
No, I did not.
Any experience with carbonate systems?
Yes.
Where?
In East Texas, we working with the James Lime as well as the Collin Valley Lime, and then but primarily it was focused on tight gas sands and then shales and conventional. But we were also had to do a rotation through an unconventional team that would do asset evaluations around the globe. So we would look at various plays throughout to see if there were any assets we wanted to acquire.
Okay. You said you didn't have any experience at Chesapeake with enhanced oil recovery. Did you have any experience with residual oil zone operations or assessments or evaluations of those types of projects?
Not operations, obviously. I mean, at Chesapeake, no exposure to residual oil zones. At Halcon, when we were working Williston, obviously there's some residual oil zones in that area, but again, they were mainly on a regional mapping and evaluation. It was not in operations or development.
I'll get up to that point in a moment. Just taking it methodically here. Okay, so primarily tight sands unconventional for Chesapeake, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And at that time, did you do any work in the Permian Basin for Chesapeake?
It just some minor cross asset where if they needed somebody to help put a well plan together or something like that, but not directly, no.
Nothing in the Central Basin Platform.
No,
Okay, so Petrohawk is primarily the Eagle Ford Shale, is that right?
correct.
Again, no enhanced oil recovery
No, not at that time, no.
and no carbonate.
No,
Then you moved over to Comstock, correct?
correct.
And was that all shale or unconventional sands?
Yes,
No EOR, no enhanced oil recovery,
correct,
and no carbonate?
correct.
Okay. And then Halcon, did I pronounce that correctly? Halcon?
Halcon,
Halcon, okay. This was more of a mix, it sounds like, some Eagle Ford shale, some marine shale. So there's some carbonates that you worked on with Halcon?
correct. We had, when I started with Halcon, when we established it, I started working primarily the Williston Basin, but we were also doing asset evaluations out of our Denver office, then transferred down to Houston, and then I again working Eagle Ford Shale and Tuscaloosa Marine Shale. We did not have any carbonate assets other than the Austin Chalk, but nothing primary.
When you say nothing primary, what do you mean by that?
We had some non-op acreage and acreage that we picked up through various acquisitions, but it was nothing that we were currently operating in.
So at Halcon, there were you didn't have any enhanced oil recovery experience?
Correct.
Okay. And no, so you mentioned assessing or reviewing residual oil zones. What exactly did you do for Halcon in that respect?
Well, it primarily just, when we would go in to review an asset, we were aware, during the mapping process and during the evaluation of the data that the operator would give us, we were aware that there were residual oil zones present in the Williston Basin, primarily in North Dakota, Western North Dakota, but it was nothing that we worked and operated in. We were when we would see oil in place, but no production or unmovable oil, we would be aware that you had a primarily probably an ROZ in place there.
Okay, but you didn't undertake any formal evaluation or assessment to confirm whether it was a residual oil zone or what type of residual oil zone it was?
No, we were not interested in that at that time.
Are there any ROZ plays up there at this point?
I believe that they are working to develop some, but I think Cobra operates a residual oil zone, but no, other than that, that's the only.
Okay. And then Ajax, this was most primarily Permian development asset, is that right?
Correct. We had purchased an asset from WT Offshore that was on the Martin County Andrews area.
So all Texas side Permian,
Correct.
all unconventional shale or sands?
Correct.
Okay, any enhanced oil recovery experience working for Ajax?
No.
Okay, no carbonate experience?
No.
Okay, and nothing on the residual oil zone front?
Other than when we were evaluating assets and we started seeing, if we started seeing assets moving up towards, for instance, Seminole Field, just north of our asset play, that they were chasing residual oil zones up in that area, but no.
So you're telling me that as you were developing your acreage, you were aware that there were some other operators looking at?
Correct, because we were always evaluating potential asset acquisitions in the Permian, Delaware, and the Central Basin platform.
Okay, so you're tracking what the activities in the Seminole San Andres unit?
Correct, because we were also evaluating San Andres in our area as well.
Okay. But you didn't yourself perform any work to evaluate a potential development in the San Andreas in your acreage there?
No,
And then you went solo, right, as a geology consultant?
yes, for the last few years,
Okay.
prior to coming to Empire, after we sold Ajax.
And in that role, you did some work on A&D, meaning acquisition and divestitures?
Correct, just to helping, smaller operators with, did a couple of projects where they were looking at potential acquisitions. They were all primarily in the Permian and on the Texas side for the most part, or in the East Texas, Arklatex Basin.
So you were primarily assisting with due diligence reviews on the acquisition side?
Correct. I did do a few operational projects for them, helping to drill a couple wells in the Haynesville as well as Travis Peak. But other than that, no.
Then you joined Empire in when did you join Empire?
I joined Empire about a year ago to this month.
In April?
Yes, 2024.
Okay. Now it's just not included on your CV, but you're an employee of Permian at this point.
I cover multiple assets for Ajax. For Empire.
Okay. But you are an employee of Empire at this point,
Correct, yes.
Okay. What's your job title with Empire?
Senior geologist.
Okay. And you started back in April 2024?
That's correct.
Okay. And what was your job? What are your job responsibilities, or what were you told your job would be when you joined the company?
To offer senior geological perspective to multiple plays, helping with development of assets, as well as being a part of potential acquisition appraisals or evaluations.
What's your role and responsibility with respect to the EMSU?
I am the development geologist over the EMSU.
What do those responsibilities include?
Includes just a regional perspective of the EMSU operations, well planning for potential verticals, horizontals, and multiple zones that we have rights to, as well as evaluating with our engineering team workover and completion targets with existing wells, as well as looking for potential upside on the MSU as well as adjacent to it.
How much of your time is devoted to work on the EMSU?
Right now, I would say probably 70%.
Okay. And is that the case since you joined the company?
No, I for the first few months, I worked primarily our North Dakota assets, and as well as we have some East Texas assets.
Okay.
But then in July, end of July, I got pulled in primarily in for the MSU, especially for the hearing.
Okay. Now, in your summary here, your focus was primarily on unconventional horizontal plays, agree?
Yes.
And would you agree that your experience with carbonate systems and reservoirs was primarily in the Gulf Coast region? Is that right?
Primarily, yes. Mainly the Arklatex area as well as South Texas.
And your A&D experience, we just touched on it briefly, but when you were consulting for operators on the acquisition side, would you rely on what sellers had to say about their assets?
We would utilize all information given to us by the seller, as well as information that we had access to, public and private.
And that's what you would call due diligence, right?
Yes.
Okay. And when you're doing your due diligence, what would that typically involve?
We would first, we review the sales packet, and then, depending on the asset and the size and the amount of information, as well as the amount of resources and economic availability of the operator who was looking to purchase, how deep they wanted to go.
What was your general recommendation for companies when they were undertaking a due diligence prior to considering an acquisition? Did you have a recommendation for your client?
Would be to utilize the information available to make the best decision based on the information that they had available.
Are you aware whether Empire conducted due diligence prior to the acquisition of the EMSU?
No, I was not here at that time.
Okay. You're not aware whether they have a file that reviews their work prior to acquisition of the EMSU?
No,
So you haven't reviewed any records that Empire prepared leading up to the acquisition of this field?
no. The only thing that I've reviewed is the sales package the sales packet that Exxon put together.
Okay. I'll pull over to your summary slides. In your summary of your that you set out yesterday, you reviewed some of your exhibits, and first set of exhibits that you reviewed, I think, were the structure maps that are on the top of the San Andreas, correct?
Yes.
And I think at the time when you were reviewing this, you identified that there's a top of structure sort of in this north central part of the EMSU that I'm hovering over with my cursor, correct?
Yes, it's the structural closure.
Okay. And you called that sort of the crestal area?
Yes.
Okay. And the crestal area is where you said where the highest point you would expect the best wells or the best production in the San Andreas, is that correct?
In conventional basic petroleum geology, yes, that's where you would expect it.
And that's, I think you also said that that's where, if there were injection, that you would expect the best chance of damage to be done, correct?
No, I did not.
Better chance. What did you say?
I said those are the quality of those wells are where I would be concerned the most, but that the damage would be done, that there's oil in place throughout the San Andreas based on our log assumptions. So damage could be done across the EMSU.
Okay. I thought you said that injection into that zone would result in the better chance of damaging reserves.
From those upper wells that are the better rock, yes.
Okay. And then you also said that there's a risk also of injecting down dip because the migration disposal water could migrate up dip, correct?
Correct. It would up dip through the stratigraphic column as well as up dip through the structure.
Okay. Okay. Now, you don't show it here, but just about at the very top of this structure, and let me pull up another exhibit to show. This is Empire's Exhibit B8. That was part of Mr. McGuire's testimony. This shows some of the same wells that or proposed wells that you've got on your exhibit, but it also shows the Empire's EMSU SWD #1 well, which is here in the southeast part of section 4. Now, you don't have the section numbers on your map, but would you agree with me? It's about where my cursor's hovering right here, just north of the 673 well. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And would you agree that's about the top of the crestal high?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, did I say? Yeah, forgive me. Let me just correct the record. This is what I pulled up is stupid thing. is Goodnight's Exhibit B8. Apologies for clarity of the record. So this EMSU number 1 is the disposal well that Empire has operated since acquiring the EMSU, correct?
Correct, but it's not a largely commercial disposal well. It's a low volume well.
Right. And here, Mr. McGuire's exhibit, he's got the cumulative volumes as of the date of this exhibit, which was approximately 4.4 million barrels off of OCD records. Is that about right?
I don't have the production numbers in front of me to confirm that.
Okay.
But it sounds close.
Yeah. You have no reason to dispute those numbers based off of OCD's records.
No, but I believe that well was drilled in 1966, if I remember correctly. So it's a long time.
Well, I think actually the EMSU SW number 1, it was drilled.
Oh, yeah, that's a converted. Okay.
1987, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's been injecting since 1987. You agree?
I would have to see the record
Okay.
to confirm.
But the records would speak for themselves, whatever they are,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
So that's one well. That well, now Chevron, Chevron drilled that well and created it as an SWD, right?
Yes, but injecting very low volumes.
Right. But they placed it right at the top of this Crystal High. Agree?
Correct.
Okay. And Empire acquired this unit back in the spring of 2021, correct?
I think it's a little bit before that, but yes, I'm not sure. It sounds right.
And it's been operating that well since it acquired the unit, correct?
Yes.
And when Empire acquired the unit, the intent was to develop the San Andres as a residual oil zone, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But nevertheless, after acquiring the unit, it continued to inject disposal volumes into that well at the Crystal High of the San Andres, correct?
Yes.
And my understanding in my deposition with Mr. West, that Empire has minimized or if not stopped injecting volumes into that well. Is that correct?
I would refer to his testimony.
Okay, so you're not familiar.
I'm not familiar with what their current injection rates are.
Okay, you're not familiar with how Empire is currently managing its disposal needs?
No,
the
that would be on the production team.
Okay. I mean, if the highest point of the structure is where the best production is likely to be found, why do you think Chevron put their unit disposal well right at the top of that Crystal High?
I'm not going to speculate to what their thought process was.
Okay. But subsequent to Chevron, XTO operated that well, correct?
Yes.
And they're the ones that marketed the unit to Empire, correct?
Yes.
And they're the ones that marketed a potential for a San Andres ROZ, correct?
Correct.
And they continue to operate that saltwater disposal well at the top of the Crystal High, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in addition to the EMSU SWD number 1 at the top of the Crystal High, there's a few other wells that I don't think are indicated on your map. And I'll go back to Goodnight Exhibit B8. And the other wells I wanted to point out that are in and around that Crystal High are the EMSU's water supply wells, which are, call it fuchsia. I'm not sure what color to call that, pink. There's the water supply well, the 459 in the northern part of Section 5, the 457 in the southern part of Section 5, the 460 in Section 8, the 462, the 461, and then the 278, which was not one of the original water supply wells, but a well that has produced over 1 million barrels of water from the San Andres. Would you agree with me that these wells are all located in and around the Crystal High that you've identified in your structure map?
No, I believe that a lot of those are starting to come down off the flank. There are a few, but they're definitely starting to come down off the western flank of the structure.
Okay. Nevertheless, I mean, you agree with me that they're towards the Crystal High, towards the structural high within the EMSU?
No, I mean, they're on the structural western flank of the structure. I wouldn't say that they're starting to go down dip if you move to the west and southwest.
Okay, so let's look at the 278, the 457, the 458. Those would be all towards the center of the structural high, agree?
They are closer to the structural center. Yes,
I mean, they're not at the top, but they're around the top of the structural high, agree?
or towards the higher elevations of the structure, yes.
Okay. Now, these wells had produced more than 340 million barrels of water from the San Andres in and around that structural high in the San Andres without a single barrel of reported oil, agree?
The water wells, yes,
Okay.
but there has been oil tested out of San Andres wells in that area.
Yeah, I think some of that's all addressed. I mean, that's all addressed in the testimony, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, so those 6 original saltwater disposal wells and the 1 additional well that was operated as a water supply well, no reported oil from those wells, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, in your PowerPoint that you provided for the summary, you've identified, you reviewed some of the wells and the oil saturations that were interpreted by NewTek, right?
Correct.
And some of the wells you included in your overview are the EMSU 673, the EMSU 658, the EMSU 660, and the EMSU 713, right?
Yes.
And those are also all on and around the Crustal High in the San Andres, agree?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And I'm looking at those oil saturations. For the 658, this marks, it's hard to see, but there's a little very thin green line, and this is page, I guess, slide 9 of your overview presentation for the EMSU 658. It's exhibit G3 little d. There's a little thin green line that marks the top of your San Andres, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the oil saturations are in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is that? I guess from the left, I don't know what, 4th track from the left, maybe? Is that right?
Yes.
The black indications represent the oil saturations.
Yes.
And I can't tell, is it each of these tick marks, is that a 20%?
I'd have to see the scale down at the bottom.
Hard to read. Can you see that?
Yeah, it's hard to read.
I don't remember what the scale was myself, but
Yeah, I'd have to see the scale on their log presentation.
okay. Nevertheless, it's a fairly, it's a fairly high oil saturation towards the top of that San Andres, correct?
It above the San Andres, yes.
Okay. Oops. Sensitive. And then towards the top of the San Andres here in the 673 and exhibit G3E, you've got a fairly significant oil saturation interpreted at the top of the San Andres in that well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what the oil saturations are based off of NewTek's interpretation at that interval?
I cannot recall right at that interval.
Okay. And you don't recall what the scale is on your own log interpretation?
Excuse me, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, you don't recall what the scale is on your own log interpretation?
That is NewTek's log interpretation, their log template. So I'd have to verify their scale down at the bottom again.
But you did the oil in place calculations, right?
Correct.
But you don't remember what the scale is on the log?
I've looked at a lot of logs and a lot of them use different scales.
Okay.
So I don't want to speak to something without seeing it.
Okay. Now, then the 660 also not as substantial towards the top of the St. Andrews, right? In terms of the oil saturations.
In the 660, no, but it is present.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna move back over to your revised self-affirmed affidavit or statement. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Back to your PowerPoint. This is where I want to be. Apologize. Okay, so in your Exhibit G3 in your summary that you presented to the commission yesterday, this is slide, I guess, 6, you included the range that Ops Geologic prepared as part of its rebuttal testimony, correct?
Yes,
And just so I'm clear, the top numbers up here, is this the high range on a section basis that Ops Geologic calculated?
so the top numbers,
Mm-hmm.
that's referring to the highlighted bullet point for Newtek's oil in place calculation for the Rhino SWD.
Okay.
So that was Ops Geologic's low side and high side case for that specific well, the Rhino. The one below that is Ops Geologic's range on the 640 basis compared to Newtek's, which is the last bullet point.
Okay. Now, you show both high and low for Newtek, and you have the high and low case for Ops Geologic for the Rhino well, say.
I don't have the Rhino well. I only showed their low side, Newtek's low side model,
Okay.
but I did show Ops Geologic low side, high side range.
Okay, so you've got two different analyses provided to the commission here, both using very different methodologies. One was presented as part of Empire's direct case in chief, and the other was prepared for rebuttal. Which log analysis does Empire adopt?
Well, as I said before, when we were talking about evaluating other assets for other operators, I use all the data available to me that we've tasked a third party and the different third parties to use. And at this point in time, I would use both of them because they both indicate a trend of oil in place, even the low side conservative numbers.
Okay, so you're looking at the numbers that Ops Geologic, the final results that Ops Geologic and Newtek have presented, right?
That's correct.
Are you also evaluating the methodology for how they got there?
To an extent, yes.
I mean, doesn't it matter what the analysis was that gave rise to the numbers, rather than just whether they trend similarly?
Absolutely. And that's why I would use both of them
Okay,
in my analysis and recommendations.
but they're so different. The approaches were so very different. You don't think one, as you sit here today, you can't tell me which you think is a more accurate or preferable methodology?
They're both different methods from independent third parties, which from my standpoint as a development appraisal geologist, petroleum geologist, is good because the outcome shows, even though there were different methodologies to get to an answer, they're all on trend. There's little variances, but they're all showing oil in place and indicating presence of hydrocarbons. So therefore, it would educate my recommendation to my management on how to proceed.
Now, on the Newtek analysis, We heard Mr. Dillowin testify yesterday. We were asking him about how his methodology was related to the geology. And my interpretation of his answer was that he didn't answer that question because he didn't have any geology background, so he wasn't able to answer the question. So doesn't the connection to the geology matter? And how can you, as you sit here today, how are you able to adopt the new tech analysis where there's no clear tie to or explanation or rationale to the geologic parameters?
Well, I was speaking to my evaluation. I believe that Nutex and Ops Geologic integrated geology to an extent. They just integrated different techniques. Well log analysis, which is done by Nutec, is a real-time wireline reading of the geology. They're just plugging in those curves into their model. I think now they didn't do a lithology breakdown, and that was their choice on their model.
You're talking about new tech?
Correct.
And they didn't do any mineralogy either, did they?
No, they did not.
Okay. So you don't have an opinion as you sit here about which of the varied methodologies presented to the commission on log analyses on behalf of Empires is more correct or more accurate?
At this point in time, no, I do not.
Do you have a background in, I mean, would you say, do you have a background in evaluating petrophysical interpretations?
I have a background in integrating petrophysical interpretations and working with petrophysicists in-house and third-party, depending on which operators I work for.
Okay. Now, as you sit here, I mean, both approaches provide very wide, very disparate endpoints. As Empires presented on the low side and high side, there's a huge variation in the numbers, which gives rise to concern that they may be unreliable given the spread of uncertainty between the high and low side for both approaches.
I'm going to object because I believe Mr. Rankin is basically testifying.
And they are what they are. I mean,
It's a long, I haven't heard the end of the question yet. Let's hear the end of the question.
my question is based, there's some concern. I have concern. I guess we have concern about the range of uncertainty given the high and low side for both Nutec's results and Ops geologic results.
And I'm going to continue to object to his testifying.
Mr. Rankin, it does need to be a question.
I'm getting there. So the question is, the concern is, Mr. McShane, that both approaches by Ops Geologic and Nutec could be completely invalid and based on independent flawed analyses. My question is, do you have the expertise to evaluate yourself whether or not either of those approaches is invalid?
And I'll just, for the record, continuing objection that Mr. Rankin continues to testify.
All right. Well, Mr. Rankin, you are kind of overstepping it. I mean, that question could have been asked without all the preamble. So just bear it in mind, please.
So I'm sorry, can you restate the
Sure.
question, please?
Do you have the expertise to evaluate whether or not either one of the approaches employed by Ops Geologic or Nutec are valid?
Yes.
Okay. And you believe that both approaches are valid?
Yes.
Okay. Before I leave the summary, I wanted to ask you about the structure map again. For this San Andres, the Crestal area, is it a four-way closure?
No, it's more of a three-way, but it's more regional because there's a double anticline. So you're only seeing one part of it in this region.
Okay. And the other well that I meant to mention, if I go back to Goodnight Exhibit B8, is Rice's EME 33, which is a disposal well just outside the exterior boundary of the EMSU unit, correct?
Yes,
And when I look at your PowerPoint again, whoops, that well is just here in the nook, in the corner of the EMSU, correct?
correct.
And that would be in the crestal high of that structure as well, correct?
Yes,
And that well has injected more than approximately 60 million barrels since it commenced injecting in around 1960, correct?
yes.
Okay. And is Empire also seeking to revoke or cancel the injection authority for that well?
I'm not an expert in that. I'm not sure what we're seeking with Rice.
Okay. But because it's at the crestal high, that also poses a risk to operations or recovery in the San Andreas, agree?
I would be concerned with that well injecting, yes.
Do you know if Empire is currently sending water to that well?
I do not.
Okay. All right, moving back to your revised testimony. Stupid bar. Now, you provided your original testimony in this case back in August 2024, agree?
Correct.
And you came into Empire around April of 2024, is that right?
Yes,
Okay. So do you know, and you had a predecessor at Empire who was the geologist before you, correct?
correct.
And that was Mr. Nicholas Sestari, is that right?
Yes.
Do you know who he is?
I know of the name and that he was an employee, but I don't know him personally.
And you replaced him after he left the company?
I'm not sure how far before he left, but I know I came in after, yes.
And you're aware that he had previously submitted testimony in these cases when they were in front of the OCD in October 2023, agree?
Yes,
Okay. And Mr. Sestari's testimony calculated estimated oil in place values based on Mr. Dillman's original petrophysical analysis and his testimony that was submitted to the division around October 2023, correct?
yes.
Okay. Did Empire ask you to adopt Mr. Sestari's testimony as your own when you joined the company?
They gave me the testimony. They asked me to review it. They asked issues adopting it. I spent a couple of weeks reviewing it at the time that I had, and I agreed with the overall testimony. I had no problem adopting it.
Okay. So during that time when you were reviewing Mr. Sestari's testimony, what did you do to review it?
I went over, I had about 2 or 3 weeks where I went over the project that had been put in place. I reviewed I did a cursory review of all the well logs, well log pics, what data I could get that he had provided. I re-gridded the maps to make sure that there weren't any blown tops or any issues of concern, that everything matched and was on trend with other data in the area, published data, et cetera, as well as just knowledge and experience in the area.
When you say make sure there weren't any blown tops, what do you mean by that?
Make sure that there weren't anything that I would disagree with. When you grid, depending on how finite you grid, sometimes the top will stand out as a mispick or that there's a fault or a structural issue. And I just wanted to make sure that none of that would affect the overall trend mapping of the St. Andreas or the Grayburg.
Did you make any changes to any of the pics that Mr. Sestari had in his testimony or in his structure maps or cross sections?
Over time, I adjusted a few, but they weren't large adjustments. They were by a few feet.
At the time you submitted your testimony in August 2024, had you made any changes to any of the tops that Mr. Sestari had picked?
No,
Okay. Had you made any other changes to his testimony or any of his exhibits at the
The
time
only-
you adopted your testimony in 2024?
at the time when I adopted the testimony, no. Again, I just remapped or review, make sure everything matched, and that I agreed with it.
Okay. Now, after you submitted that original testimony in August of 2024, you submitted revised testimony in December 2024, correct?
Yes,
And those were based on the changes to Mr. Dillwin's log analysis that he performed for Empire with New Tech, correct?
yes,
Okay. And I understand those changes were based on his varying M&N values, using the National Energy Technology Laboratories paper that covered a 4-county area along the Northwest Shelf, correct?
yes, as well as the 679 data.
Okay. Now, the decision to redo or update Empire's log analysis model with New Tech and the oil in place analysis was made after reviewing Goodnight's direct testimony filed in August 2024, correct?
It was made, the determination was made, yes, after that, but it was not the sole reason for the determination.
What was the other reason?
Just due diligence to bring in additional outside third-party views on the area itself.
What additional outside third-party views were you bringing in?
Ops Geologic.
Okay, but I was asking about New Tech.
Oh,
So at the time in August 2024, after reviewing Goodnight's direct testimony, the decision was made to redo or update Empire's log analysis through New Tech, correct?
yes,
Okay. But at that time, you also decided to bring in, it sounds like, a third party to redo that analysis, correct?
not to redo, but to do their own analysis,
To do their own.
independent.
Okay. So why did you decide to do that in August? Why, I mean, this case has been pending before the division for more than a year. Mr. Sestari's testimony, Mr. Dillman's testimony was originally filed in August, or rather October 2023. Why in August of 2024 did Empire decide to bring in an independent third party to do that work?
Well, speaking from myself as part of that decision, it was, I came in basically July, August of 2024. And as I was reviewing the data and we started, operationally getting results, I decided that my opinion was it was better to bring in an additional third party to get additional data, because as I've said before, the more data, the better. And so the more independent, outcomes, the better.
You said you started working on this case around into the July timeframe, is that what you said?
Correct.
And you started to see operational results?
Well, I just meant as I started diving into the project more.
Okay. But were you referring to specific operational results that you were?
No, that was a misspec. I didn't mean operation. I just meant as I was starting to evaluate the project more on my own.
Okay. What caused you to, was it your decision to seek out an independent third-party consultant to do a additional petrophysical review?
No, it was not my lone decision. It was in consultation with other members of the team.
Okay. What additional data did Ops Geologic bring in at that point? Do you know?
Ops Geologic didn't bring in any additional data. We gave them basically all the data we had in-house to build their own model.
Okay, that would include all the core data and well logs that Ops Geologic used?
Correct, as well as public data that they got on their own.
Okay. And do you know when that data was provided to Goodnight that you gave to Ops Geologic?
I do not.
That data was given to Ops Geologic, what, in August or September of 2024?
Correct, but it was data that I believe was that we had already provided It wasn't new data that we had acquired.
Okay. That's your understanding.
Yes.
Now going back to New Tech, so in August 2024, the decision was made to also ask New Tech to do this additional analysis following the review of Goodnight's direct testimony, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And as to New Tech, was there any other motivation to ask New Tech to do a new analysis other than Goodnight's direct testimony?
Other than we just wanted their model, another pass at their model, making sure that they were using the existing core data that was available.
Okay, because Empire hadn't previously given that to them, correct?
Correct.
But you also didn't give them the RR bill number 4, right?
Correct.
But you gave that to Ops Geologic, correct?
Don't think we gave it. I think Ops Geologic got that data publicly or from another client.
Okay, but you asked them to do their analysis on
We
that,
asked them to incorporate all core data that they could get their hands on.
but you didn't ask New Tech to do that, did you?
We asked them, to my knowledge, I was not there when New Tech was tasked with the original scope or the revised, when they were asked to do to do a second pass at their model. So I just know that we gave them the 679 data and the study to incorporate into their model.
Okay, but to your knowledge, Empire didn't ask them to incorporate the RR Bell core data in their analysis, correct?
Not at that time, no. I don't know if it was done before I came on board.
To your knowledge, has New Tech analyzed the RR Bell number 4 based on the core data?
I believe that, to my understanding, it's in their model, but it was not given to them by us, and it's part of their big program that they use, that they incorporate everything into.
Okay. How as to the 4-county study, how did Empire come to the decision to use that as the basis for New Tech's reanalysis of its log analysis?
That decision was made by some of our engineers and gave it to them. I do not know how they came to that determination.
Were you involved in that determination?
Not in that said meeting, no.
At any meetings?
Yes, was involved with meetings with them, but that data was given to them in a separate.
I mean, as the geologist, overseeing the EMSU for Empire, what role did you have to provide input on whether the 4-county study was appropriate geologically for use in the EMSU?
When it was brought to my attention, I agreed that, all data that we could be able to create an analog or potential analogs was good. That it was sent after, or I was told after it was sent, but I agreed with the decision.
Okay. Did you yourself conduct a review or analysis of that 4-county study to determine whether it was appropriate or analogous for use by New Tech?
Very high level.
Okay.
Quick pass.
Okay. What's your understanding of why that 4-county study was selected?
Again, I believe it was just a potential analogous data that could help them dial in their model a little, to the best ability.
Specifically, for what purpose is your understanding that the 4-county study was used or selected?
I would have to defer to our engineer for that one.
Okay. Now, just at a high level, it's your understanding that the 4-county study was used to select potential M&N values for Empire's revised analysis, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And those numbers, those values were just pulled from that 4-county study, correct?
They were compared in the model to create New Tech scenarios. So they were used as analogies or analogous examples of different ways that they could look at varying their M&Ns.
Okay. From a geologic perspective, was New Tech given any other guidance on what zones or types of rocks to apply those M&N values to?
other than just that we were evaluating the Grayburg and the St. Andrews, but
They-
primarily St. Andrews.
Okay, I was gonna say they apply those M&N values only to the San Andreas.
Correct.
Okay. So other than just having those numbers, no other guidance or analysis or input was provided to New Tech about how or where or what circumstances to apply those M&N values in the EMSU logs, correct?
Correct.
So to your knowledge, you don't know how or whether those M&N values were applied based on any geologic factors or parameters that relate to the EMSU logs?
Correct. I don't, I'd have to refer you to Galen's testimony.
Okay. And so you don't know, you yourself didn't do an assessment to determine whether there are any, whether those M&N values have any geologic relation or correlate to the geologic, the existing geology in the EMSU wells, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then just to be clear, we understand from Mr. Dillowin, but just to be clear, it's your understanding that Empire instructed New Tech to revise its analysis using that paper, correct?
We instructed them to run another model, not revise, but to run another model to give us a range of case.
An entirely new model.
Correct. To make another pass at their model, to do another run,
Okay.
but integrating that data.
Okay. And were you part of that? I mean, are you aware of what instructions Empire had given New Tech to do that work?
That we would ask them to run and make another pass at running their model, integrating the data that we had given them.
And that would be the 679 core data and the Fort County paper.
Yes.
Okay. And did Empire also instruct them, New Tech, to do its analysis based off the core water saturations?
No.
How did New Tech come to decide to use the core water saturations?
I do not know. I was not involved in that decision. I believe that was their internal.
Okay, so you weren't involved in that decision, so you don't know whether they were instructed or not to use to calibrate to the core water saturations.
Correct. I do not know.
Okay. So yeah, okay, very good. So now, when did Empire ask New Tech to do this revised analysis? Do you know what it was?
I having a hard time. I believe it was in October, November of 2024. But I can't remember.
Okay. So the direct testimony was all filed by Goodnight in August 2024. Would it have been that following month?
Probably. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, September. Okay. Was that the first time, to your knowledge, that Empire considered trying to calibrate New Tech's logs to core log intervals for the San Andreas?
I do not know if that was the first time. There could have been discussion prior to me
Okay.
coming on the project, but it was the first time when I was involved in it on my end, not Empire's.
Okay. Who do you know, was that your decision, or were you involved in that decision, the recommendation to try to calibrate any of New Tech's analysis to core intervals?
That was part of the conversation, yes.
Okay. Were you surprised that hadn't been done to that point?
Not surprised. Different vendors run different techniques, and it's, needs to be instructed sometimes on data that they need to utilize.
Okay. And just to be clear, Empire had the EMSU 679 core and core logs at the time of your original testimony in August 2024, correct?
Yes,
And Empire had the core and core logs for the EMSU 679 at the time of Mr. Sestari's testimony in October 2023, correct?
I don't know. I was not here in 2023
Okay.
with Empire.
And that core and core logs were available for New Tech at the time. Okay, so you're telling me you don't know back in 2023? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to pull up at the time of or shortly after you submitted your revised testimony, Empire filed a notice, an amended notice of revised testimony at the end of January, where they explained what was changed and why. And on the first page here, I've highlighted some language that explains that in light of the direct testimony filed by Goodnight Midstream, Empire requested NewTek to rerun its analysis with different M&N values and to review the 679 core. You agree with that statement, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But where it says review the core report, what it actually did was to calibrate its log analysis to the water saturations in the core, correct?
That's what they did. Yes.
Right. Okay. And then they provided in this notice, it states that NewTek did this work, and then provided Empire with the results in October 2024, correct?
Yes.
And then about a month later, in November, Empire asked NewTek to apply that analysis to the other well logs in the EMSU, correct?
Yes.
And then, 2 weeks or so later, is when you filed your revised testimony, correct?
Yes.
And that was based on Mr. Dillwyn's analysis, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, this next section here is an overview of the changes that were made to your testimony in red line. Do you see that?
Yes.
I think I can't quite get it all on one page, but I wanted to understand these changes. First, before I get into them, I want to just be clear that the changes that were made, I've highlighted this sentence here, that Empire filed the revised testimony of Joe McShane as it relates to the revised testimony of Mr. Dillon. You agree with that sentence?
Yes.
Okay. And then as to your specific testimony, it says that the revisions in Mr. McShane's testimony arose from the revisions to Mr. Dillon's testimony. They were made to paragraph 10 of your testimony as reflected in the red line below. In addition, you made some changes to some of your exhibits, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I've highlighted here as I understand it, like there's different sentences that address each of the wells, right, that were analyzed.
Yes.
So just for ease of tracking, I've highlighted them so our eyes can track easily the different sections. But I'm going to start with the 658. Okay. I'd like you to explain to me what was changed based on Mr. Dillon's analysis and as per the 658 well.
Basically we added the net oil interval based on the 0.1 millidarcy permeability cutoff, which contains oil. We then revised the oil in place number down from 60.9 to 30.29 million barrels of oil.
So explain to me the 0.1 millidarcy permeability, which contains oil. How did that play into explain how that revision or change came in based on Mr. Dillon's testimony? Well,
it was just the internal decision to use that as the cutoff.
Okay, so 0.1 millidarcy, so tell me what that cutoff means. What is that? What's the effect of that using that cutoff?
Just it establishes in the calculation where we would start considering hydrocarbons or oil in place.
So everything above with a porosity, or rather a permeability above 0.1 millidarcies would have oil.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, it possibly have oil based on that permeability,
Based on that.
but there's multiple
Sure.
things that go into that.
So in other words, but that's your cutoff. That's your perm
Yeah,
cutoff.
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
For
For new tech.
the new tech analysis.
Correct.
Okay. Do you know what cutoff Ops Geologic used?
Ops Geologic used they didn't do a perm cutoff. They did a oil saturation cutoff,
Okay.
which explains a little bit of the variance in their numbers.
Um, 0.1 millidarcy. Isn't that very low for a perm cutoff?
Relative to, I mean, it depends on the reservoir. Each reservoir is different. The rock, that was the perm cutoff that that was discussed and went with.
What was the justification for using that 0.1 millidarcies?
I'd have to go. I can't recall what was landed on for that with New Tech.
Were you part of that discussion with them to make that determination?
No, I was not.
Who was?
Our reservoir engineers and New Tech.
In your work in the field and in your experience, have you ever seen or used a 0.1 millidarcy perm cutoff for oil?
In fields, I've used less than that, but that's not that's a petrophysical determination, and I'm not a petrophysicist. So I'd lean towards the expertise of our reservoir engineers and the petrophysicists.
All right. So then, that 0.1 millidarcy cutoff is what influenced the net oil interval change. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then why did the logged interval change?
And it's also what it has influenced the net interval calculations through a lot of these wells is just the length of log through the San Andres. There's not a lot of complete logs through it.
So on that point, your original testimony said that the well cover was approximately 400 feet, and then you changed that to 371. How did that get changed?
I believe that was a tops correction, a blown top.
Okay. So now my question to you is, why were the tops changed at this point based on Mr. Dillon's testimony? Revised now.
Well, top wasn't changed on Mr. Dillon's testimony. It was just changed on evaluation and realizing that there was possibly a top that was off.
Okay.
And revising it just out of, looking for additional issues.
And that top was the San Andres top pick, right?
Correct.
Okay. How about the MSU 673? Tell me what was changed here?
The 673, again, it was just revising down the oil in place numbers.
But you changed the log interval as well?
I believe so, yes.
Was that due to a change in the chop?
I can't recall.
Why else would you change the log interval?
Could have been just a miscalculation in the original pass that we thought there was larger amount of log stratigraphy logged, but is it possible that it was a top correction? Yes, I can't recall on that one.
Okay. And again, you modified the oil in place based on New Tech's revised analysis?
Correct.
Downwards, correct?
Correct.
Okay. How about the 713?
Again, 713 revision down of the net oil pay and the estimated oil in place.
And again, you changed the the footages that are being covered by the log run in the San Andreas, correct? From 200 down to 125 feet?
Correct. And also that also wasn't necessarily an internal correction. That could have been a correction that New Tech had, the top wrong on it. We don't know. I can't recall on that well.
Why else would you change the log interval? Wouldn't it, I mean, it's a change in the top, right?
I can't speculate why I would have. I mean, that was a good reason to.
It's your
And it's probably the most
testimony.
likely. Yeah, I'm just trying to remember that.
Okay, so you don't recall why? you
Yeah, I
changed-
believe it was an adjustment to New Tech's top on that well.
Okay, but that was based on Empire's input on the tops change?
The tops that they had were prior to me coming on board. So I don't know if they got those tops directly from Nick or if they had internally picked their own tops. I did not ask them where they got their original tops from.
This is your testimony, Mr. McShane. I'm just trying to figure out what the basis was for the change. Is it due to a change in the top, or why did you?
I believe
change
it
that
was
log
due
run?
to change in the top, yes.
Okay. How about the 660?
Again, primarily same type of corrections,
Mhm.
revising down.
Was it a change in the top that resulted in, or was it also a change in the top that caused you to change the log interval for that well?
Possible, yes.
Okay. For every instance where in these wells where you've changed the log interval, is it likely due to a change in the top for the San Andreas?
Yes.
Now, in addition to the changes in tops and the reduction in the oil in place calculations that were done for each of these wells, one other factor was changing here, and it seems like the net pay was going up in these wells. Is that true?
Yes.
What was causing the net pay to increase in all these wells?
Probably the perm cutoff was one factor in that.
Any other parameters change that you can account for that might account for the change in the net pay going up?
No.
So more than likely, it's the use of the 0.1 millidarcies?
Yes.
What about oil saturations?
What about oil saturations?
Would oil saturations also affect the calculation of net pay?
Yes.
Okay, and those changed in this analysis, correct?
Yes.
So the 0.1 millidarcies and the change in the oil saturations calculated by, interpreted by New Tech would result in changes in net pay, correct?
Yes.
The San Andreas here is a conventional reservoir, correct?
Historically, yes.
In your experience, have you ever used a 0.1 millidarcy cutoff in a conventional field?
I can't recall.
Okay. One other just point I wanted to make, I didn't address this with Mr. Dillwin, but you also deleted the sentence here where there was a reference to the Simondou calculation, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall why you deleted the reference to the Simondou?
No, that was made because I believe it was just in cleaning up the language.
Okay, do you recall that Mr. Dillwin changed, no longer used the Simondou? He relied entirely on a basic Archie's equation when he was doing his log analysis?
I refer to his testimony on that.
Okay. Now, all these tops changes that we made as a result of
Mhm.
adjustments or blown tops, do you know whether, have you determined whether these tops now that have adopted in your revised testimony match the tops in Mr. Bailey and Mr. Burkhead's testimony and exhibits from Ops Geologic?
Yes,
They do.
yes.
Okay. So as of December 2024,
Well-
you conferred or reviewed Mr. Bailey, Mr. Burkhead's revised tops and used those and adopted those for your own, correct?
Well, I'll rephrase. We know that they match within a few feet of each other. We didn't give them the tops that they needed to use, and they didn't give us their tops, but they're all pretty close as far as picks go, within a few feet.
Okay. Now, did you pick these tops or were these based off Mr. Bailey's picks?
No, these were my picks.
Okay. So, okay, I guess you're telling me that between your picks and Ops Geologic picks, the picks for this top of the San Andreas, they're within a few feet. So they're more or less the same, is that what you're telling me?
Correct.
Yeah.
Mine, Ops Geologic, and Dr. Bob Lindsay's tops are all within a few feet of each other.
Are your structure maps for the San Andreas now the same as Ops Geologic?
Within reason. I mean, they're the same. They trend the same. They show pretty much the same thing. Their maps are
Okay.
gridded on a different grid scale or different structural interval, but they show that they show the same story and the same geologic story.
But have you reviewed and confirmed that all the tops that were used by Ops Geologic and compared them to your tops?
Yes,
You have, okay.
yes.
Now, going back to your self-affirmed statement, turn down to exhibit G3 little d. And I'm at the bottom here, I'm going to use this as a sample, but explain to me then how you came to, did you calculate this table in your exhibit?
Yes.
Okay. At the bottom left-hand corner, and this is exhibit G little 3D. Of your revised testimony, explain to me, just going from left to right, how you calculated each of these entries for your tables.
Gross interval feet is just, number of feet logged in the San Andreas, net pay, net interval feet using the 0.1 millidarcy cutoff. And then average porosity is averaged over the San Andreas. These are all numbers just specifically in the San Andreas. Average oil saturation averaged over the San Andreas interval based on new text analysis. And then average permeability of 2.19 millidarcies.
So all these numbers here are derived from new text log analysis, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. What's the difference between net interval and net oil interval?
Net interval is just basically that there were hydrocarbons in place. Net oil interval is within the perm cutoff.
Okay, so I didn't quite get that. What's the difference?
So 184 feet would be hydrocarbons present. Net oil interval would be 182 feet within the perm cutoff.
So
Of 0.1 millidarcies.
okay, so
Or greater.
as I understand, because you're using a very low cutoff of 0.1 millidarcies, you're
Mhm.
only excluding 2 feet of oil from the San Andreas, correct?
Because we're using 0.1 millidarcies, that's as a cutoff. That's what's come out. Yes.
Okay. But each of the other entries, so average oil saturation at
Mhm.
39% is an average over the entire San Andreas interval, correct?
Correct.
And there's no cutoff applied to that saturation, right? That's just average saturation across that whole interval.
Correct.
And the oil in place calculation that you did, is there any cutoff applied to that oil in place calculation?
No, other than the 0.1 millidarcies
That 0.1
for
would apply.
permeability, in the initial review. But no,
Okay.
no saturation cutoffs.
Why did you not use a saturation cutoff when you did your oil in place calculation?
It was determined by the reservoir engineers.
Okay. That wasn't your decision.
Correct.
Okay. Now, when you do your oil in place calculation, you're measuring on a section basis, right? You're calculating out on a section basis, 640 acres. But that value there that you've got in that box is based on log data from a single well, interpreted well, right?
Correct.
And it's extrapolated out on an assumption that what you interpreted on the log data can be uniformly extrapolated out across one section, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, looking through, and now the same calculation, same approach was used for each of the well log interpretations represented in your testimony, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you calculate when you were reviewing the log interpretations that NewTek prepared? Did you calculate, or is there an oil saturation of 30% for any continuous interval of 400 feet within the San Andres well within the San Andres in any well that was analyzed?
I cannot recall if there was.
Okay. Would it help if I walk through each of these slides?
Sure.
Okay. So if I look over here, I see a net oil. So I guess I'd be looking for the net oil interval, right? I'd be looking for two things, net oil interval and then the oil saturation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So here for the EMSU 658, the net oil interval is 182 feet, correct?
Yes.
And the average oil saturation is 39% for that interval, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So how about the 673?
Correct. 153 and 40%.
Okay. So that one, there's not, now is this going back up here to this 658, that 182 net feet is spread out over that gross interval, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that wouldn't be a continuous 182 feet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in the 673, that's 153 net over 362 feet, correct?
Correct.
And that's a 40% oil saturation. So, but that 153 feet is not continuous, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the 713, again, you've got a net interval of 40 feet out of a gross of 125 with an average saturation of 48.4%, but that 40 feet net is not continuous, correct?
Correct. But I'll also remind that not all these logs went through the entire San Andres interval as well. So it just does not account for any hydrocarbons below the logging interval on wells, while the 713 did. Some of those other wells did not go all the way through.
Right. And then the 660, again, you've got a net oil interval of 313 feet out of a gross of 431 with an average saturation of 34.4. But that net interval of 313 is not continuous, agree?
Correct.
Okay. And the 746, you've got a gross interval of 1,223 feet with a net oil interval of 508 feet at an average oil saturation of 25.1. But that net interval of 508 feet is not continuous, agree?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any section of that 746 well where you have 400 feet continuous oil saturations above 30%?
I do not recall if there is. No.
Okay, sitting here today, I mean, you've got the log right here. Can you tell me whether or not there's any interval that's beyond, that's 400 feet that has 30% oil saturation?
Not continuous, no, but intermittent, yes.
Intermittent above 30%?
Well, I'm just saying is there's a possibility you see spikes in hydrocarbons, maybe 100 feet apart or 50 feet apart based on that log. I can't without zooming in, but where you may see some wells, the continuous, there is no 400-foot continuous interval. That's what I'm saying.
Right. But I'm also asking about the average oil saturation.
Mhm.
It doesn't exceed 30, it doesn't exceed 30%, does it?
Correct.
Okay. When you have calculated oil, you've calculated oil in place before in your career, correct?
Yes.
Have you ever not used an oil saturation cutoff when calculating oil in place?
Yes, I've done it many different ways.
So you
We'll
have,
use-
you, in your prior experience, you've had occasion not to use an oil cutoff for your oil in place?
It's dependent on the situation, and sometimes I've run multiple, methods of calculating, but, this was determined for this one route here. But with like for instance, but like the Ops Geologic, we used an oil saturate, they use an oil saturation cutoff on theirs. So we wanted to see both, compare both numbers.
Okay, and if you used an oil saturation cutoff, it would be, depending on what you used, it would be a different calculation, wouldn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. Now the oil saturations that are calculated here, is the oil saturation across the entire San Andreas, or is it just across the net oil interval?
It's the average over, average oil saturation over the entire.
Over the gross interval, correct?
Yes,
Okay, all right. And that's true for all these logs? that you
Correct.
analyzed. Okay. All right. Now, next exhibit here, G, that I want to talk about is the G4. I think this slide was presented as part of your summary. Now, this is for the 660 well, correct?
yes,
And you include the mud log here on the left side of the exhibit for the same interval that you snipped the log analysis for, correct?
yes,
Okay. But so the intent here was to indicate that there were potential shows in the mud log that correspond with the log analysis, right?
the intent was to show that you saw the same shows and fluorescing and gas shows in the same interval, because multiple wells throughout the area, throughout the MSU, where there's just mud logs, have the same type of response in the San Andreas. But here we had the benefit of wireline that was analyzed by Newtek, showing hydrocarbons in place at the same time as the gas response.
And the portion here that aligns with the mud log, you've got high oil saturations. What are those oil saturations?
You see oil saturations ranging from between probably 20% upwards of 55%, maybe a little higher in certain zones.
Yeah, and so each of these tick marks is what? Is it 10%, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,
Yeah,
70, maybe even above 70%? Yeah.
but I'd say 75%. I believe there were 1-2 spikes we saw.
So you included the mud log and you're
Mhm.
indicating that there are indications of shows, and you included and this is Newtek's revised analysis, correct?
Correct.
And the revised analysis would have a lower oil saturation than their original analysis, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, but what you didn't tell the commission during your analysis or your summary or in your testimony is that the operator of the MSU at the time perforated this exact interval through and had 6 sets of perfs tested from between 4,126 feet to 4,239 feet, correct?
I know it is perfed in the zone. I don't know the exact footages. Top of it.
But you didn't include any of that information in your testimony or in your summary to the commission yesterday, did you?
No, I did not.
Okay. And you didn't tell them that those 6 perfs were swabbed multiple times over a 4-day period in 2005 and that they tested 100% water?
No, if I remember correctly, the 660 did test 12 or 20 barrels of oil, but I'll defer to engineers for that.
Okay.
So I'm not a production engineer.
So the testing that was done, there was a series of 24-hour pump tests that were done on those 6 perfs, right?
I'm again aware of it, but I would defer to our engineers on that, production engineers.
Okay. But you didn't provide that those data points as part of your representation here to the commission on the performance of this section of the log.
Correct. I didn't talk about the performance of the log.
Mr. Rankin.
Yeah. Want to take a break?
Yeah, I've been waiting for you to sort of finish this section, but I'm not sure if it's finished.
No, I think, let me just see real quick. if There's a spot. I think, maybe just let me ask another question or two and then we can take a break.
All right.
Apologize. Just kind of so you're familiar generally with the fact that this interval was tested by the prior operator,
Yes,
okay? But you don't know the specifics about how much, what was tested, how it was done, or what the test results were.
correct, other than that it did test a little bit of oil.
You're familiar, you're aware that they plugged back this zone and came up whole
Mhm.
with the Graybird?
Yes, well, it was a test zone. The primary objective was the Graybird.
Let's take a break, Mr. Hearing Officer.
Okay, thank you. Let's take a 15-minute break and be back at 10 of. Okay, we ready to proceed there, Ms. Apodaca? Ms. Tellez, are you ready? All right, I see a thumbs up from her. Mr. Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. Before I leave these logs, Mr. McShane, I have on my screen, let me know if you can still see this.
Yes.
The EMSU 746 log interpretation from New Tech, right?
Yes.
One question I had, I was just looking at this and over the break, and you've got an average oil saturation, which we confirmed is for the entire gross interval, correct?
Yes.
And here you've calculated it to be, or rather, I guess the calculation is as 25.1% average oil saturation for that entire gross interval, correct?
Yes.
But I'm looking at it, just all the blue is interpreted water, correct?
Yes, in their log that is interpreted water.
And the black is the interpreted oil saturation, correct?
Yes.
Just looking at this, I'm wondering how do you know, I mean, it just seems like how you came to 25% when most of the interval is interpreted as being water.
That was their, display, but when we averaged the curves and the data output, that's what we calculated.
Okay, so it just is what it is based, I mean,
Yes.
just adding up all these little tiny little black little bits
Well, across the interval, yes.
across the interval, it all adds up to 25%.
Yes.
It just looked like it was not proportionate. But the calculation is what the calculation is, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, here in paragraph 13 of your revised self-affirmed statement, you refer to the EMSU 200H landing zone. Explain to me what this paragraph is all about.
There was a question about where the IMSU 200H was landed and producing from as a horizontal well. And we were just confirming that it was indeed landed in the Grayburg Reservoir.
And that question had come up in a previous contested matter between Empire and Goodnight, correct?
Yes.
And that was in the Piazza case. That was between the parties at the division.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And at the time of that hearing, Empire's position was that the well was producing from the San Andreas. Is that correct?
I was not here at that time, so I do not know what the position was.
Okay. But
But
the
I was
point,
asked to confirm the landing zone.
okay. But the point here is that it's actually completed in the Grayburg, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So did you review the testimony and evidence in the Piazza case in order to address this issue?
No, I just re-steered that well with the current model.
Okay, but that Piazza case is one of the matters that's currently pending before the commission as a de novo matter, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Okay, so you agree with Goodnight Midstream's rebuttal testimony and evidence in that case that this well was completed and producing only in the Grayburg?
I agree that this well was landed in the Grayburg.
Okay. This next section of your testimony, you address some blue highlighting in this exhibit G7 A and B that reflects a dolostone package, right?
Yes.
And I think you'd address this in your summary of your testimony. Tell me what this dolostone package is, and maybe if it's easier, if you prefer, I'll go down to the exhibits.
So the light blue is highlighting a dolostone interval within the San Andreas that basically it's brecciated and there's fractures through it, but it's largely considered below the Premier Sand, which is just above the top of the San Andreas. And it's, there's discussion over whether or not that is a consistent facies or lateral facies across the field. And so in these exhibits and in testimony, we talk about that because of fractures present as well as collapsed brecciation due to nonconformity, it does not serve as a boundary to prevent migration of fluids.
Okay, and so this Yellowstone package is related to, you said it's just below the top of the St. Andrews, but that's the pick that Empire has picked for the top of the St. Andrews, correct?
It's the top that's Empire picked, as well as the top that's constantly recorded with the state, as well as in documents that we've provided through the state, where they've identified the top of the St. Andrews as being 150 foot above, or above. Sorry, totally drawing a blank here, but just below the premier sandstone,
Okay.
a few feet below the premier sandstone.
But you don't show here where Goodnight's identified permeability barrier is, do you?
No, I do not.
And you don't show it on, this is exhibit G7 little a, and you also don't show that on your exhibit G7B, do you?
No, I do not.
Okay. And are you saying that Goodnight has selected that Yellowstone as its permeability barrier?
Not necessarily. It is referred to a lot as the permeability barrier, but it's the Goodnight tops range a lot differently than the accepted tops in the state and unitization. And so some of them refer to that permeability barrier, some don't. But what I'm just trying to show here is that the lateral top facies of the St. Andrews is not consistent in thickness, or the fact that it's not as massive. It has brecciation and fractures that would serve as secondary permeability pathways.
But the point I guess I'm trying to make sure I understand is that you're not showing anywhere on these exhibits or in your testimony, you don't address Goodnight's permeability barrier that it's picked, have you?
No, because these were submitted before Goodnight submitted their stuff.
But Goodnight hasn't changed its permeability barrier from any of its cases, including those that were presented to the division, including the Piazza case, right?
I object to Mr. Rankin testifying again.
Mr. McShane, you're aware that Goodnight has had previous contests between Empire before at the division.
I am aware, yes.
Okay, and in those cases, are you aware that Goodnight had picked permeability barriers that isolated its injection?
Aware as in just being discussed, but I have not reviewed the materials
So
in those cases.
prior to preparing your testimony, you didn't bother to review Goodnight's permeability barrier picks that had been presented to the division and contested with Empire in advance of this case?
I did my independent analysis and appraisal of and did my own mapping.
But part of that wouldn't have been to review what actually Goodnight actually had picked as a perm barrier?
Objection, argumentative, lack of foundation.
Overruled.
Mr. McShane, you were aware that Goodnight had a case before the division with Empire and that they had presented a perm barrier in that case.
I'm aware they had presented perm barriers, yes.
Okay. But in preparation for this case and in this testimony that you submitted in August of 2024, you did not review Goodnight's perm barriers?
As in that, other than that they were calling the top of the St. Andrews a perm barrier, but Goodnight's top of the St. Andrews was not consistent.
Okay. So, but you basically, you're telling me you didn't look at the Piazza case or Goodnight's testimony in that case, correct?
Yes.
So in preparation for this testimony, you didn't know where Goodnight's perm barrier was picked, correct?
Not in the Piazza case, no.
Did you know where it was picked in these cases when you prepared your testimony?
I knew where in the generality, yes,
Why didn't you address it in your testimony?
because this is my mapping and my exhibit. I did not want to put it in this exhibit.
Okay. Let's see, is this the one I want to know? In this same exhibit G7A, you got a bullet over here where you say basal blocks moved post deposition causing fractures to form, creating pathways for fluid communication. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
What evidence of fractures do you have related to these structural blocks that you allege exist near this crestal high?
Evidence of fracturing in the 679 core, as well as in outcrop studies throughout New Mexico and the Permian Basin.
Okay, so the outcrop studies are how many miles away?
I can off the top of my head tell you.
Dozens of miles?
Yeah. Yes,
Hundreds of miles?
possibly about 100 miles.
Okay. Now, as the 679 well, is that on the crestal high?
It's slightly off.
I'm not going to bother trying to find it right now, but you're telling me that the 679 is within the crestal high?
It's in the higher portions of the structure, but it's not on the apex of the structure.
So you were arguing me about whether or not these water supply wells were in the crestal high, and you're telling me that the 679 is within the crestal high?
It's off. It's within the higher parts of the structure, but it's not on the crestal high or apex. Is what I just said.
Okay. I may want to take a moment to pull that well up, and I will. Maybe my colleague can help me find the 679, so we have a map of it. So you're relying then on when you refer to the 679, you're referring to the fracture study that was conducted by Dr. Lindsay, correct?
Of the physical core, yes.
Of the physical core. Okay. And Dr. Lindsay, you yourself, did you yourself review that fracture study?
Yes.
Okay. You don't include any of that analysis in your testimony, do you?
Correct. I do not.
Okay. So in terms of the testimony, are you relying then on Dr. Lindsay's analysis of that?
No, I'm relying on the fact that I've visually seen the photos of the physical core that there are fractures present.
Okay. And in those depths, have you correlated those depths with the depths that relate to, you just told me that you don't know where Goodnight's perm barrier is, right?
I mean, I know the generality that they're calling the top of the St. Andrews the perm barrier, but I don't have the exact footage. But again, I'm talking about analyzing independently the reservoir as on my own.
Okay. But in terms of the fracture study that Dr. Lindsay prepared, have you identified, have you confirmed that there are fractures through what Goodnight has identified as the perm barrier?
The fractures well throughout the top of the St. Andrews into the Grayburg. So yes, I would expect that they would go through the perm barrier that Goodnight has.
But okay, the top of the St. Andrews that Empire has picked as the top of the St. Andrews, correct?
Empire, other operators, as well as the state.
Okay. But okay, very well. But you don't have nothing. You're not giving me any specifics about what footages or depths those fractures are located in, or how they relate to the how Goodnight's pick for the perm barrier that isolates its injection from the overlying production.
Other than in the cross section where it shows the light blue, it has the core description in cartoon that was done during the initial analysis that indicates brecciation and fracture, the slide before.
This one?
Yes, where you have the call out box.
Yep. And you don't show anywhere on here where Goodnight's perm barrier is, right?
Correct. That's just the interval of the top of the St. Andrews where it's referred to as the perm barrier.
So other than the 679, what other evidence do you have to support your statement that the fractures are more prevalent near the crest of the structure?
Again, the 679 core fracture studies done regionally by Dr. Lindsay, as well as outcrops, as well as analogs, and in other fields where when you have anticlines and uplift and the rock's bent, you expect to see fracturing in this type of rock. And that goes along with what we've identified in the core as well.
Okay.
I'm-
Let's see if I have. You don't know what section the 679 well is in, do you, Mr. McShane?
not off the top of my head on this map, no.
Okay. I'll come back to it. Eat. Would you disagree with me, Mr. McShane, if I told you that the AMSU 679 was in section 8 to the west of the water supply well 460?
Not necessarily, but I'd need to see it on the map.
Yeah. Okay. Assuming that it is west of the 460 well in section 8. Oh, God, sorry. That would put it approximately where my cursor is here. Is that correct?
Yes,
And that would be off the Cressel High, wouldn't it?
it'd be in the higher sections, but coming off the Crestal High, you're correct, which is all the more reason to believe that there's fracturing even further up on the Crestal High
Okay.
when we see it off the down dip section of the wells.
So within the EMSU, the only direct evidence that you're citing to me about potential for fracturing is the EMSU 679 well, correct?
Correct. Physical visual data fractures in the 679 well
Okay.
is the only physical data that we have.
Okay. Empire's expert witness, Steve Melzer, has an exhibit where he refers to some potential vertical fractures along the Crestal High in his exhibit C15 as being conceptual. Is your statement about these basal fractures referring to the same fractures that Mr. Melzer refers to as being conceptual?
No, I'm referring to physical fractures seen in core,
Okay, and that would just be the 679, right?
as well as outcrop, multiple sections in the St. Andrews showing fracturing.
Okay, again, those outcrop are dozens, if not hundreds of miles to the west, southwest, west.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I think this is your last exhibit, Exhibit G8. You've included a page from, as I understand, from as you state here, the 2021 sales package for the EMSU, correct?
Correct.
And what's the point of this exhibit?
Point of this exhibit for my purposes is to show that even in XTO and Exxon, we saw they have identified an upside of the potential residual oil zone. Their calculated oil in place numbers were on trend with two separate independent analysis done by Ops Geologic and New Tech. So just again showing that we're on trend with what was evaluated in their sales package.
Okay, now on that point, XTO has put the base of the RZ at minus 700 feet subsea depth, correct?
Yes,
And but that's not where the base of the RZ is in either New Tech's analysis or in Ops Geologic analysis, is it?
correct.
And they put the base of the RZ, what, at the bottom of the San Andreas interval?
Yes,
Okay, so how's that on trend?
because the bulk of the wells analyzed that go into the well in place calculations, the logs were a lot shallower than all the way to the base. So again, Exxon would have probably been using the same logging intervals that we had to do our analysis. And that's where they call their base. We believe it's much deeper based
Okay.
on the analysis done by Dr. Lindsay, as well as New Tech and Ops Geologic.
Now, did Dr. Lindsay do an analysis of what analysis are you referring to that Dr. Lindsay did?
Just in general, looking through the stratigraphic column.
I don't recall him.
But he didn't identify an ROZ or anything.
He didn't, did he?
No.
Okay, so I was a little bit confused by that statement. And you agree that XTO had all the same logs and information that Empire's had, correct?
I do not know, since I did not evaluate the data given to us by XTO during the acquisition process.
I mean, are there any other logs or wells that have been drilled or core that's been taken since this property's been acquired from XTO?
I do not believe so, but I'm unsure. But again, I can't speak to what they had in the house.
But Empire hasn't drilled any new wells, right?
No,
And Empire hasn't taken any new core, right?
correct,
And Empire hasn't run any new wireline logs, correct?
correct.
Did to your knowledge, did Empire rely on the statements XTO made in its sale package when it acquired the MSU?
Not to my knowledge, I don't know what they used.
Okay, is Empire now relying on the statements from XTO from the sales package?
They are not relying on it, no.
Okay. One thing I'm going to go take you back real quick to the question about fracturing here, these basal blocks and shifts. Do you recall the location of the RR Bell number 4 well?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Do you recall the location of the RR Bell number 4 well?
Yes, vaguely. I mean, it's to the north, yeah, right there,
Right in this section, correct?
correct.
That would be higher, closer to the crestal high than the 670, agree?
Yes,
And are you familiar with whether or not there's any fractures evident in the RR Bell number 4 core?
no,
You're not familiar?
no, I'm not.
Okay. So if you were interested in evaluating whether or not there are fractures associated with the crestal high, why wouldn't you have evaluated whether or not there's fractures evident in the RR Bell number 4 well?
I'd need to see the RL core report.
But how many cores are there in the San Andres within the MSU?
2,
Okay. And one is a 679, correct?
yes,
And the other is the RR Bell number 4, correct?
correct.
And so, and there, being that the RR Bell number 4 is closer to the crestal high, why wouldn't you have reviewed that?
Well, we
core?
reviewed them, did not have any photos for that core. So I cannot put my physical eyes on the core.
Dr. Lindsay didn't include photos of the RR Bell number 4 core in his testimony?
Not at the time when I had not seen them at the time of this,
Okay. You've seen them,
this testimony, filing this.
and you've seen them since? correct?
Yes,
And do those photographs evidence any evidence of fractures?
yes,
They do?
yes. There's not as much as the 679 well.
Okay. So your opinion is that the RR Bell number
Mhm.
4 does include fractures?
Let's see some evidence of resealing, but yes.
Okay. Okay. Did Dr. Lindsay address the RR Bell 4 as being fractured in his analysis?
No, this is my analysis.
Okay. And you don't include it in your written testimony, do you?
Didn't have it at that time.
Okay. When did you acquire it?
Last few months.
Okay. So you didn't have it when you did your revised testimony?
No,
Dr. Lindsay filed his testimony in August of 2024, correct?
yes,
So why wouldn't you have had it when you filed your revised testimony in December of 2024?
I just hadn't had it. Didn't look at the photos.
Okay. Looking at your revised testimony, I'm going to go back to G3. I think it's little b. In your revised testimony, at the bottom here, I've highlighted a statement that you make that disposal of the Delaware Basin water into the San Andreas is damaging the hydrocarbon reserves present at the EMSU.
Yes.
What analysis did you do to establish that there's damage to hydrocarbon reserves in the San Andreas at the EMSU? Or let me rephrase that. What analysis did you do to establish that there's damage to hydrocarbon reserves in the EMSU?
And as far as me, I did basic geological analysis and modeling that if you're pumping high volumes of commercial water into the formation that's moving up dip and there's fractures present, that you would eventually damage the reservoir if it hasn't been already.
Where is that modeling or analysis or data in your testimony?
It's just experience and knowledge.
You and I reviewed some of your background and your history
Mhm.
in different fields. Where have you experienced that previously?
In the Permian Basin, there
Where?
were operators that were proposing or had drilled saltwater disposal wells, and there was great concern over, regardless of which formation, that you would be, if there were fractures present, that you would see watering out in that formation.
Okay. Based on your experience, did that occur?
I did not, we did not see that because we did not have any on our acreage in the Permian.
Okay. So did you yourself do any analysis in your prior experience on potential impacts from offsetting saltwater disposal wells on hydrocarbon reserves?
No, because I would never approve of a saltwater disposal well on my acreage previously, regardless of a formation.
I guess you told me just now that your interpretation and your conclusions in your testimony were based on your experience, and I'm asking what experience have you had making such evaluations?
Basic petroleum geology. That
Okay.
if you have two formations in communication and you're moving up dip through structure and you have secondary permeability and porosity through fracturing, that you will move fluids between those.
And your testimony here was about secondary porosity in a dolostone, brecciated dolostone, just below Empire's San Andreas Pick, correct?
Correct, with fractures present.
Okay. And you didn't identify anywhere on here where Goodnight's permeability barrier is located, did you?
No.
Okay. I'll talk a little bit about Empire's purported plans for a potential CO2 flood. Have you or anyone else that you're aware of from Empire had any preliminary meetings or communications with the Oil Conservation Division staff to discuss the proposed EMSU CO2 recovery in the San Andreas?
I have not, and I'm not aware if anybody else has or hasn't.
Are you aware, what are the confining zones for the San Andreas ROZ if CO2 is permitted to be injected into the San Andreas?
I have not been involved in the CO2 flood modeling.
Okay. So based on your testimony today, you're telling me that there are fractures in the San Andreas that allow for communication into the Grayburg, correct?
Yes.
So what are the combining intervals that you would identify as a geologist for Empire that would contain CO2 injection into the targeted interval?
I cannot speak to that right now. I have not done that analysis.
Okay. Has anybody at Empire done that analysis?
I've not been a part of that discussion. I do not know.
Okay. So you, as we sit here today, are you aware of anybody doing any analysis about potential for injection of CO2 and making sure that it's contained within the target intervals?
I do not know.
Okay, is there anybody else in charge of geology at the EMSU other than you?
We have not been brought in on the geologic side, just on they've just on the modeling side for the reservoir. But no, I do not know anybody who's done that.
Okay.
I've not been a part of those conversations.
Is there anybody else at Empire who would do the geologic evaluation of the containing zones for CO2 injection?
No.
So it'd just be you, right?
Yes.
All
And
right.
I believe that I'm not sure how far along they are on that. Like that they've gotten to that phase.
Okay. Is Empire considering CO2 injection to both the Grayburg and San Andreas intervals?
I would have to defer to our engineering group on that.
Okay. Have you evaluated whether the Grayburg serves as a barrier to upward migration of CO2 injection?
No, I have not.
Okay. Do you know if anybody at Empire has done that?
I do not know.
In terms of the Grayburg or overall, has anybody done an analysis of whether CO2 would be contained within the injection zones between the Grayburg and or San Andreas?
I do not know if they have done that yet.
I'm interested in sort of generally, Mr. McShane, a question about reserves. Part of the dispute or debate in this case is whether or not there are any hydrocarbon reserves in the San Andreas. How do you, as a petroleum geologist, define reserves?
Presence of hydrocarbons that are recoverable within a formation.
As part of your analysis in this hearing, have you undertaken any determinations of whether any hydrocarbons identified in the San Andreas are recoverable?
Other than just being a part of helping to identify that there's an ROZ in place, no, not in the reserve calculation side.
Okay. So you haven't calculated a recovery factor?
No, I have not.
Okay. Have you been involved with any preparation of any reserve reports?
No, I have not.
Okay, so you've never signed off on any reserve reports in your experience or history?
No.
Okay. Mr. Hearing Officer, I believe I have no further questions of this witness.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rankin. So Mr. Moander, you'd be next.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. Good morning, Mr. McShane.
Good morning.
Oh, scoot this way so I can see around council. So I've just got a few questions for you. Again, my name's Chris Melander. I'm counsel for the Oil Conservation Division. Just want to confirm a few things with you. Based on my review of the records, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it looks like that your testimony was submitted as direct testimony and then revised. Is that right?
Yes.
And you weren't deposed in this matter, correct?
Correct.
And you did not submit any rebuttal testimony. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. It's my understanding, based on reviewing your file direct testimony and then revised testimony, that you didn't review any OCD filings for the cases before the commission. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then because you didn't review any of those, it would be a reasonable assumption you didn't analyze those pleadings.
Yes.
And then therefore you have no opinions on OCD's case in this matter.
Correct.
All right. Thank you. I will pass the witness.
All right, Mr. Beck for Rice.
No questions.
And thank you. Okay, Pilot.
No questions for this witness.
All right, then we're back to the commission. Chairman Rosatos, I'll start with you. Do you have questions for Mr. McShane?
No questions for me. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Lampkin, questions for Mr. McShane?
I don't have any questions either.
Dr. Ampoma, then to you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir, for your testimony today. Do appreciate that. And if we can keep the PowerPoint on, that would be really wonderful. I appreciate that. Mr. Mission, I'll start by saying that, so if we can go to the slide where we do have I think Exhibit G3A. So you answered one of my questions right there when I asked about the comparison of the work that has been done by Object Geologic and then also New Tech. So there was one slide where you showed the values. Will it be this slide, but probably on your...
Yes, it is. It's in the power. That was in the testimony. This is in the power right there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so can you tell the commission how much of these, and let me say that I do appreciate you putting it there because it solved one of my puzzle. But my question on this one would be, can you tell the commission how much of these estimate is for the upper San Andreas and then for the lower San Andreas?
I cannot quantify because the calculation was over the entire San Andreas interval that each individual log covered. And again, only one or two of the logs covered the complete San Andreas interval. So it was more based on the calculations were more based on total feet of logged interval than it was complete interval. So I would by that, I would expect that if we had full logs, we would then be able to break it down like you were asking.
So would it be fair to say that most of the estimation will probably be in the upper section of the San Andreas?
I do not believe that. I believe that the analysis shows hydrocarbons present through both intervals, but what people are referring to as the upper and lower. It may not be continuous, but it's pretty robust throughout in a lot of the wells. So I'm not sure that would be the best generalization for it.
So from geological point of view, and I do know that there's an engineer who will be coming.
Yes.
So there are some questions that I will ask in general, but I just want you to speak to it from a geological point of view. So from all the analysis that Empire has conducted through their consultants and also their geologists, can you tell the commission how much of these oil that has been estimated is recoverable?
Not to date. No, I cannot speak to that. How much is recoverable?
And from all the geology team that you've worked with on this case, meaning the consultants from, let's say, petrophysics, geology, you cannot comment on how much of these oil that has been estimated will be recoverable.
Correct. It is believed that a large amount would be able to, but we do not have enough data yet or far enough in the process to be able to do that on a geologic standpoint. Engineering may have a better opinion on that.
So from geology point of view, do you believe that how much can be recoverable is also a central part of this case?
From a geologic standpoint, my first goal was to provide enough information analysis that there were large amounts of hydrocarbons present, even if they were not movable hydrocarbons, in order to identify an ROZ in place.
So in your PowerPoint, I saw you talked about consistent barrier, not consistent barrier. So, and I see you more as, let's say, the expert combining all the geology work that has been done and presented to the commission.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So from all the analysis, can you comment or tell the commission whether Empire has identified any barriers within the San Andreas, or let's say between the Greenback and the San Andreas?
No, we do not believe that there is any barrier that would between the Grayburg and the San Andreas due to, again, the inconsistent nature of the top of the San Andreas as layered on with the potential fracturing and fracturing identified, as well as the collapsed breccia environment of that zone, that there is a pathway between the two.
So we do have the EMSU 679 well that was drilled 1990. And then also you asked New Tech to analyze multiple, about 979 wells.
Correct.
Was there any analysis done to look at the time series of those wells? Let's say 1990, and then the next year that the other wells were drilled, to more or less establish some trend of the saturation changes over time.
No, we did not ask them that because of the nature that the data that we have currently, regardless of when it was drilled, like they were all drilled fairly early within the Grayburg flood, water flood zone. So your log analysis is pretty, for lack of better terms, clean or virgin at that point. And we haven't had any new wells after many years of injection or injection by saltwater disposal wells to be able to offset and drill another well and do additional petrophysical work and log analysis, which would be great. But we haven't had the time to do that or the money right now when we've not sure where the project is going.
Well, so I read through some of your testimony, especially the revision to your testimony. You are referencing 2005 open hole log run in 2005. Now, water injection has been going on, probably based on some of the examples, probably in the 60s. So that is where my question is coming from. Did you compare, or has there been any analysis where you compare the saturation or oil in place calculations from the earlier wells to any of these 2005 references that you're making in your revised testimony?
Not within the geology department, Commissioner. Again, if I wanted to, I would argue that internally within our group, that even those wells drilled were basically point A type data points, that I would want another well very close, if not directly offsetting, to see how that rock changes over time. It would, we're not as densely infilled as I felt you would be comfortable just going by 2005 wells. But again, that's from a geologic team perspective. I'm not sure on the engineering team.
Okay. So from the geology team from Empire, do you guys have any experience in ROZ operations?
I do not, no.
Okay. And your team, because you are more or less the senior
Correct.
geologist.
Yes, correct. We do not.
Okay. Now, are you familiar with other ROZ plays in the Permian?
Yes, to the extent of, aware of them and know their locations and zones that they're performing.
Do you know the typical recovery factor for these fields?
I do not know the recovery factor, sir.
Now, can you tell the commission, and this has been something that we really want to have some answers to, from geological point of view, how is the high volume of the water injection impacts your development of the ROZ from a geological standpoint?
basically, if you're we feel that if you're injecting the commercial volumes, the tens of thousands of barrels per well a day being injected into the system, that eventually you're going to basically prohibit the ability of CO2 to potentially move the hydrocarbons that are in place that are unmovable right now that would only be movable with CO2. It would affect the ability for that to occur. Not to mention that you would potentially affect the Grayburg because of the lack of barrier, our current water flood in Grayburg production as well.
So essentially, continuous injection of the water can inhibit the development of the ROZ.
Correct.
And is Empire considering in their volumetric calculation and then also their development plan, how much can be recovered, considering the excessive amount of water that has been injected?
I cannot speak to what the engineering group has considered, but I would assume they have, but I know that they'll be testifying to that later this week.
Okay. How many saltwater injection wells does Empire do you have within the EMSU that you are aware of?
We have no commercial saltwater wells. Ours are only for makeup water and things. So there's only, I think, 5 or 6, but they're very low volume, couple hundred barrels a day in their history. They're not the high volume wells that we see being proposed and have been drilled.
So is Empire planning to continue utilizing those wells?
I would have to defer to our production team on that.
Okay. So Empire is proposing or asking the commission to revoke some saltwater injection wells, as part of the application. Can you comment from a geology point of view on each of these proposed wells or existing wells, their impact on the Greenback based on the evidence presented to the commission from the geology point of view?
From the geology point of view, the impact would be the same across all of them, which is you're, again, either injecting or proposing to inject high volumes of outside water that is into a formation that has no barrier and it's moving into our water flood and it's replacing water that's already been pumped out and eventually going to exceed that. And that's going to basically affect how our water flood is set up, the recoverability of it. I have not done that as a geologist, the recovery factor, but from a geologic standpoint, that's how it would affect. And then obviously it would also start to move fluids up dip, which again, would affect the recoverability depending on each well and each injection well put in place for the Grayburg. It's a complex question, but from a geologic standpoint, those would be the things I would be on watch for, concerned about.
Thank you for that. Now, let me ask, with regards to, let's say, when you say that there is no barrier between the Greenback and then the San Andres, and as we all know, the water injection started way back 1966 or 1920s or whatever it is. Has there been any evidence, presented to, let me put it this way, integrated evidence presented to the commission establishing that the water injection in the Greenback or in the San Andres is adversely impacting the Greenback?
I'm not going to speak to production numbers and information, so I'll leave that to upcoming testimony.
No, so from geological point of view, integrated geological point of view.
At this point in time, we do not have an integrated, because we do not have the type of data that we would need to see if it's affected the formation or not. Additional wells, again, offsetting with logs, and if it's changed in the core, if we've changed saturations or anything that were previously seen within the formation.
So are you not adapting Mr. Backwater's geological model that he used for his modeling?
I know that I'm not going to speak to Dr. Buckwalter's model per se, other than knowing it was a material balance model, and that the just aware of what vertical perm values he was using. But I know that it seemed to be in line with what our team was seeing as far as the behavior of the Grayberg wells.
So what role did your team play in that geological modeling development?
When the model was being developed, it was prior to me coming on board. So the model started to be developed and run prior to August 2024. I mean, I know it took a long time for that model to run. It was quite a robust model.
So you cannot speak to how the geology, so more or less, okay, let me start from this way. Did you more or less were you overseeing the work that New Tech and UpGeologic did?
I was overseeing the Ops Geologic and the New Tech work, correct. Engineering was overseeing the modeling from Dr. Buckwalter.
So how tell the commission the integration of all that great work that were done by these two great institutions that has been presented to the commission, how that was integrated into that geological model that Dr. Backwater utilized.
I mean, the data that was given by Ops Geologic and New Tech, but primarily New Tech, because Ops Geologic's data had not been in. We did not have that yet when Dr. Buckwalter's model was being produced. It was primarily New Tech that would have been given to the engineers that were overseeing Dr. Buckwalter's work and with the model, but I would leave it to them. I don't want to speak directly into that. I can't. Because it was before I was there.
Okay, but let me put on the record that the hydrocarbon in place calculation that Dr. Backwater provided to the commission is in nowhere close to that of New Tech.
Okay, I'm not sure which hydrocarbon place calculation he utilized. I would refer that back to the engineers.
So you said that his Dr. Backwater's analysis was more or less in line with what your team was leaning towards. Is that
That's what I've been told. Yes. As far as the water, what with the like the communication between the zones is what I'm referring to, between the Grayberg and the San Andreas.
So, when you experience, working in this type of fields, I mean, when Dr. Backwater presented the results to the Empire team from a geological point of view, were you okay with, let's say, utilizing the high PAM values to establish to the commission that there is a communication between the San Andreas and the Greenberg?
I was, and that's a great point to touch on, which is, I know yesterday it was discussed. You had asked Galen with New Tech that question. The high perm volumes that Dr. Buckwalter used, the 500 millidarcies and up, those were not in the San Andreas. He was using those for zone 1 and 2 of the Grayberg, which there's core in the Grayberg that show perm in the thousands of millidarcies in the upper 2 zones. And so he was confused. The vertical perm that Dr. Buckwalter used between the San Andreas and the Grayberg was I believe 0.1 millidarcies. So that was a mistake on their testimony.
Well, can there be any evidence to prove that? I mean, and I went back and forth with him on that. I mean, this is new to me actually, because I remember Mr. Rankin showed the layers that were utilized. And that is where I picked that from. It was right in the layers. The first model was run assuming there is no vertical, assuming that there is a vertical barrier between them, right? And then the subsequent scenarios, I saw that. I mean, we all saw that, right? So in there, I saw that the layer between the Greenberg and then the San Andreas, the interface, that is where he adjusted that KV. I don't remember he saying, or even from the results that I saw here showing 0.1 millidarcy. I didn't see that.
I would have to defer to the engineers coming up on that question. That's just because, like I said, that was the minimal amount that I was involved in that. But like I said, I know the higher higher permeability calculations we've seen were in the core and the upper Grayburg in the thousands, 500 to thousands. So I suspect that's where Dr. Buckwalter got that data.
So are you going to be on record to say that Dr. Buckwalter probably made a mistake in his presentation?
No, no, sir.
You said that.
I meant Galen not Galen, Mr. Sorry, the previous witness prior to that. I believe he was confused in the zone that he was talking to, not Dr. Buckwalter.
So you are not speaking to my discussion with Dr. Buckwalter.
I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
Having utilized those high PAM for the, let's say, for the San Andreas top layer.
Correct. I apologize. I misunderstood your question. What I was just referring to was yesterday's testimony that I believe was answering that they kept referring to the highest perm in the San Andreas, and I'm just was saying that was up. To my knowledge, the highest perm in his model was in the Grayburg, the upper two zones of the Grayburg. But again, I know that it'll be addressed.
Well, so we do have the transcript, so it will show that, and that was a concern to me. And I wanted to know from a geological point of view, what did you make of that? And remember, he talked about, I needed to do that to take care of the fractures. So it's a little bit, it's a little bit surprising to me when you're saying that he used 0.1. How do you use 0.1 to really address a fracture?
Yeah, I do not know how Dr. Buckwalter came up with those numbers, and I don't want to speak to them.
And I'm sure you understand why I'm asking you these questions, because I see you more as the lead geologist,
yes,
that oversaw all the geological aspect of the work, so you are more or less on the hook for any geological
absolutely
that has been presented to the commission. Okay. And that took us more on the sideway, but let me get back on track here. Can you tell the commission, at least just take the well 679 logs and MAD log data and confirm the presence of ROZ in the upper and then in the lower San Andreas?
We can confirm the presence of hydrocarbons in those zones. And because we do not believe that they are movable, we can identify that those are in ROZ, that there is a potential ROZ in place.
And that one is confirmed with the MAD logs as well.
Correct.
Okay. So Mr. Rankin touched on one of my important questions. So from a geological point of view, and honestly, I did not appreciate when you said that it was the engineering team that picked a 0.1 millidarcy. I mean, how do they do that without the geology input in that?
Well, they were doing that in consultation with Dr. Lindsay, with Ops Geologic, with New Tech. I mean, it wasn't just a singular voice in that decision. There were multiple people involved.
So definitely there was a geological input.
There was a geological, but not my geological input at that time.
Okay, yeah.
Is what I was referring to.
Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, I was a little bit, I'm like, okay.
Correct.
Okay, but so Mr. Rankin was asking you, so as a lead geologist, can you tell the commission how that CO2 that is going to be injected into the San Andreas is going to be contained and not impede the correlative rights in the Greenback?
I, at this point in time, cannot speak to that. No, sir.
So do you believe that, or is the engineering team can respond to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, with regards to the revision to your testimony, where there was changes in the net pay
Mhm.
estimation that impacted the oil in place calculation. I was a little bit surprised though that there wasn't an immunological analysis done, but there were these substantial changes. Can you comment on that?
Well, I believe it was a matter of timing to get them complete, as well as just the nature of the analysis done by New Tech versus Ops Geologic and their petrophysicists, and just the amount of time we have to be able to integrate, the core data and the mineralogical breakdowns. And obviously that's additional steps that would be taken in the future. Absolutely. But no, we felt that that their model integrating the sampling set that they had was enough for what their output was producing for us. And I believe that mineralogically, I mean, they have well responses. They have, the curves are going to respond mineralogically. And I believe I feel confident in how they were varying in their different scenarios, their M&Ns. I believe the Opsiologic took a little more, their petrophysicists took in more of the mineralogical model and the data into their calculations.
There's been a lot of questions about the M&N.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so from a geological point of view, is it in our industry, acceptable to just more or less be changing M&N without any geological context?
Traditionally, like in a lot of different places, yes, but I believe that they had the knowledge of the analog fields and seeing San Andreas wells and production and cores in other areas, and that you may want to vary your M&N in certain models based on your depositional environment, but it does come back to the geology when you start to really tie those in. But once we got their outputs and we looked at the oil in place numbers, we saw that they were in line similar with kind of the same ranges that we were seeing with Ops Geologic as well. I mean, there were differences, absolutely, because of cutoffs used, but that where you had one model that used a little more of the mineralogical data versus the other, but you saw similar. We felt comfortable at that time utilizing that. But that's why that's why I revised my testimony to use the lower case from the range of the two models that New Tech used.
Okay. So I heard today, though, about outcrops, fracture from outcrops. Has there been any evidence presented to the commission to that effect?
Other than just Dr. Lindsay's fracture study, he refers to it and his testimony.
Dr. Lindsay talked about outcrops.
Yes. He talked about his outcrop studies that he did prior to doing the fracture study that he conducted for Chevron, but I'm not sure what he submitted for evidence, but.
Okay. So New Tech analysis.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so yesterday we heard about, let's say, a petrophysicist log analysis saying that he doesn't even almost have a big faith in the core data. I mean, can you speak to that?
I disagree with him.
Okay, I also do. Okay,
rock is rock, and you're not going to get a better reading than that. So,
yeah. So then, why are you not really utilizing that to prove the existence of oil saturation in, let's say, in the EMSU?
That was their company's choice in the matter, and while we were just The initial scope was to see if there was hydrocarbons present. It was a great first look model. And that's why I revised my testimony to, again, their low side case, because it was utilizing and calibrating back to the core data. I believe that was important.
Okay. And my last question to you will be, when you look through some of the figures that you were showing, let's say G3D, Exhibit G3D, let me just use the well names, EMSU 658, and I do appreciate you showing that, and then also on the map. Then 673, EMSU 713. Now EMSU 660, EMSU 660, and then EMSU 746. I mean, those two wells in particular, particularly EMSU 746, shows a lot of water, high volume of water saturation in there. So do you believe that these estimates per session is a representative of the entire EMSU?
I believe that their estimates within the 640 box that they're calculating, and you will see the trends vary, water saturations. You're definitely going to see, zones within it of higher water saturation based on those wells. But you're also going to see the oil saturations needed in place.
Yeah, so if you can give me the EMSU 746, that would be Exhibit G3. Yeah, the next. No. 746.
Oh, I believe it's in the revised testimony, not the, we
Yeah.
didn't have all of them for the presentation.
And if you are familiar with that one, you see that that one has a lot of water in there. Would that be an outlier? Well,
I'd need to see, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, the map. Just want to make sure I'm speaking to the right thing.
so that would be page 23 of 31, New Tech Analysis of San Andres, Exhibit G3H. And I promise that is my last question.
That's okay. She's gonna bring
Yeah, so if you look at this one, at least the top portion, you can see, you do see some of the black, but if you look at that entire session, it is mostly water bearing zone. So would that be more or less an outlier compared to some of the other ones that you've shown earlier?
I believe that it could be an outlier compared to some of the other ones we've shown. Obviously, we'd like a bigger sample, but when you look at the average porosity in water, if you could scroll down just a little bit, please,
Down.
so I can see the yeah. So what you see is your average porosity tends to be, if I remember correctly, a little higher than some of the other wells, but still pretty much on trend. Your oil saturation's 25%. So I believe there's one or two other wells that you see for the logged interval, those type of oil saturations. So yes, I believe the water saturation number would be on, probably an outlier for that area.
And these ones, are they hand calculated or software generated oil in place, as you see the bottom there?
Well, those calculations are made off of Newtek's model, like their curve outputs.
So it's based on the software output, not necessarily.
Well,
hand
we internally calculated them based on their values from the curve outputs.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
I do appreciate your time talking to
Yes.
us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ampoma. Ms. Shaheen, I assume you'll have redirect?
I
I'm not-
believe I will have some redirect, but not a whole lot.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to cut you short because it just flipped over to noon. So we'll pick back up at 1:30 with your redirect.
Let me
do some quick mechanics. At 1:15, the commission is going to discuss the
oral closing request. And so they're going to be meeting in quorum. And so it'll be a closed session. So if I can get a commissioner to approve a motion to go into closed session from 1:15 to 1:30 under the Open Meetings Act 10:15(1)(h)(2). Can you have so move?
I do move.
Can I have a second?
I second.
Okay. And is all approve of that? Okay. So that's where we'll be from 1:15 to 1:30.